looking for something I could do with lichens. I knew that just collecting lichens wasn't going to bring in much research money. So I ran across an article by a guy in Great Britain who was using lichens that he would collect in oak stands. And he visited oak stands in Great Britain and France and collected the lichens, identified the lichens, and compared his lists, one with the other. And he realized that while a lot of lichens were the same in all these different stands, there was a subset of all the lichens that tended to be found only in the older sites. And a lot of these stands were in the royal family, so they had long histories. And he could tell which were the older stands, and that some of these lichens were only found in these older stands. So I wondered, it sounded fascinating to me at the time, and I wondered if I could do the same, repeat the same thing in the Acadian forest. So ended up collecting a lot of different sites over the years and came up with indicator lists like he had, indicators, old growth forest indicators, lichen indicators. And I developed indicators for northern hardwoods forest, another set for spruce fir forest, and a third set for northern white cedar swamps. So this is the gist of the talk that I'll be giving here. This first map is the Acadian forest, which basically some people define as the distribution of red spruce. So the Adirondacks in New York was the westernmost region of the Acadian forest. Then the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Maritime Canada, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and then the part of the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec. So, and the University of Maine at Fort Kent is right here at the top of Maine. It's one of the smaller campuses, about 1,000 students or so. So for those that aren't quite sure how lichens tie in with other things, this is a downed log in the forest, and the green is moss, and you see the little mushrooms, the fungi there. Lichens don't happen to be in the picture, but they could just as well be part of that collection of things. They often grow with mosses and other fungi. So this sort of typical mushroom sort of thing is a group of fungi called the Basidiomycetes. So a lot of the mushroom-looking things like this would be Basidiomycetes. This is an Ascomycete. And this is the group that 99% of all lichens belong to, or Ascomycetes. And this is a stipitate Ascomycete, or an Ascomycete with a stalk. And lining the cup at the top is where the spores would be. And those spores are in long sac-like structures that you call an ascus. And so this is an ascus of a Ascomycete with the ascospores inside. Now, if you've got a lichen, let's say on this tree over here, a lichen is a combination of a Ascomycetes fungus and an algal partner, most commonly the green algae. And when the lichen here is going to reproduce, a lichen doesn't reproduce. A lichen doesn't reproduce as a lichen. The fungal spore from, let's say, this lichen over here blows onto another tree and starts to germinate. and forms fungal hyphae from the spore. And as that fungal hyphae is moving around on the bark, it comes in contact with an algal cell. So bark in the woods, you just find algae on tree bark. They could be even leaching out from other lichens on that tree bark, but there are algae to come in contact with. So this big round cell here in the background, Trabuxia irisi, that's an algal, green algal cell. And when the fungal hyphae makes contact with that algal cell, that's the beginning of a lichen. And if you're interested in lichenology, there's some specialized terminology that you learn. Rhizines, or how they attach to the surface. You have little structures, lobes. This is the fruiting body, or the fungal, that's where the spores are. So that's the fungal part of the lichen reproducing. So it's from that structure that the spores would blow around, germinate, come in contact with algae, and then start up another lichen. But you can also, there are ways you can get clones of one lichen from another. And that's via some powdery mix of fungal hyphae and algae, which are common in a lot of lichens. And that's just that mix of fungal algae or fungal hyphae and algae can either wash away or blow away, and then pretty much it's a clone of that lichen you can have developing over here. Another one, so that's called Ceridia. Another way is Isidia, which are little finger-like structures off the lobes of the lichens. And that also is a mix. It's covered over, but it's also a mix of fungal hyphae and algae that can also get broken off, blown off, and start another lichen over here. And these next few slides are just like different lichens that you'll see out in the woods. So all that whitish stuff there, that's all lichens on these trees. No lichen is as green as moss. So if you see something this green, it's not going to be a lichen. So that's moss. And then all these, this yellowish green one is a foliose lichen. When you're learning lichens, the first thing you learn is growth form. So if it's flat and has lobes, that's a foliose lichen. If it's a lichen that looks like it's been painted on the bark or the wood of a tree, like this whitish stuff that you see all around, that's a crustose lichen. And then the third growth form is fruticose lichen, which is very branchy, like maybe hair, looks like hair, like old man's beard, some of you know, or it looks like little branching trees, like reindeer moss. Those are fruticose lichens. In the Acadian forest, there's two of these calicioid lichens that I'll be talking about that are fruticose lichens. Some of us saw one yesterday, the Spherophorus on the trees that we saw in the older part of the forest. And then, but all the rest are crustose lichens. So most of what you see on that tree is all lichens kind of growing up to each other and so forth. Foliose lichens with moss here and there. Looks like a lot of the trees we saw yesterday. So again, when I first started this project, I was looking at all lichens. So I was developing lists of indicators of all lichens within each of these stands. So we had crustose lichens, fruticose lichens, foliose lichens as part of this list of old growth lichen indicator species. Lichens also grow on rock. Rock tripes, some of you may know them, are very broad. They're attached at only one point on the lower surface, so it kind of flops down off of that attachment point. These are reindeer moss, which are really lichens, very branching like trees. They use this particular one in like model train sets and architectural renditions for representing trees. Some of you know matchstick lichen or British soldier. Okay, now a subset of those indicators that I mentioned for the different forest types, I had picked 30 different indicators likened as old-growth indicators. So among the list that I had developed early on were a number of lichens that were like the lichen I had found back in California, the Calicioid Lichens. And the group as a whole, the technical name is the Calicioid Lichens and Fungi. So some of them have an algal partner, they're the Calicioid Lichens, but the other group looks identical to them except that they do not grow with an algal partner. So they're just straight fungi. So again, the group as a whole is known as the Calicioid Lichens and Fungi. So this is a little bit larger than life size, but this is a bunch of Calicioid lichens on sugar maple bark. Some of you can make out little roundish areas. That's at the top of a stalk, a short stalk, and then the ball at the top is where the spores are. And then you go down to the bottom of the stalk, and if this is an algal, if it's a lichen, it will have algae near the bottom of the stalk. Sometimes that algal partner is embedded in the substrate, so it might be embedded in the bark or the wood, sometimes the algal partner is up on the surface and very obvious. This is a yellow birch branch, and you may be able to see across the top of this little stalk things. These happen to be 1/4 of a millimeter tall. Generally speaking, most of them are a millimeter tall. There's some oddballs that are up to 7 millimeters tall, but those are very unusual, certain species. So this is the size of these Calicioid lichens and fungi. And I think once you get used to that size, if you cut off a twig, you can hold it up to the light, you can see something, on the edge of the bark. If you're coming up to a tree and are looking for these things, you never want to study the branch by, looking here, because you want to see them sticking off the surface. So you get kind of a profile, you want to look at the edge. And the same thing is true for the trunk of a tree. You don't want to be looking straight at the trunk because they're hard to see. But if you go to the edge and you can see them kind of sticking off, that's the better way to find them. Okay, here's that same lichen on a little larger magnification. It shows you the stalk, and the little ball at the top is where the spores are. Earlier I had a picture of some ascomycetes, the stipitate ascomycetes. They had a cup and a stalk. That stipitate ascomycete is comparable to each of these apothecia. So the stalk and the top, that's an apothecium. So in most lichens, the apothecium is usually little round disc-like things that you'll see on the surface. So those are the same as what these would be. So a few variations in size and so forth. This particular one is a lichen that I collected in Abrams Woods in Nova Scotia. And it was on a decomposing birch stump. And this is the only collection in North America of this species. It's only been collected 4 times in the world. And one of those sites is, from what I hear, is now a mall. So there's three known sites. So this, I'm thinking this is probably the most, the rarest organism in North America. This particular one, at the top of each of these, so again, these are all apothecia. At the top, you can see the spores, and I don't know, can you see that it's brownish? It's kind of brownish versus black. So that's one of the things you can use when you're looking at these things under a dissecting microscope. The spore mass is either going to be brown, and that makes it in the genus Chenotheca, or it'll be black, and everything else has black spore masses. This particular one is tall and kind of flexurose. The stalk is kind of wavy. And up near the top you see this yellow coloration. That's a pruina, yellow pruina. Yellow pruina, white pruina. Those are some of the variations in color between the species. A taller one with a flexurose stalk is the spores are pale brown. They look hyaline there maybe, but pale brown is what there. You see the stalk is kind of whitish from the top to the bottom. This is a species here that can, this is the one that can grow quite long, maybe 7 millimeters long. This is a fairly short one in that particular species. Same genus, but smaller apothecia. It's a different species than that last one. This is one, another, when we are collecting these Calicioid Lichens and Fungi, we're particularly interested in the microhabitat that these things are growing on. I'll have a section of slides on what some of the microhabitats look like, but this is one of them. This particular species grows only on resin of conifers. So there's a subset of this group called the resinicolous Calicioid fungi. And they are fungi, they're not lichenized. And there's, I've collected these out in British Columbia, and when you come up to a trunk and you see resin flows from broken branches or whatever, this particular group was found right on the outside of the resin, so you can see them easily. Back here in the east, I never find these things out on the outer surface. If you chip away at some of that resin, you realize that there's little chambers on the inside of the tree, and that's where these things are. So it took a long time for me to realize that. So now I'm starting to find more and more of these things, but it's a very unusual sort of a microhabitat. Being non-lichenized, they don't need light, for photosynthesis. So this is another resinicolous species. The stipe or the stalk is whitish. First, the other one was more like a lime green. Another interesting microhabitat are little bracket fungi that grow on the genus of the bracket is Tricaptum. So the little mushroom bracket sort of fungi That's with all that hairy stuff at the bottom. So this is a surface of a bracket fungus on a spruce. So you have a calicioid lichen on the brackets of a spruce, Tricaptum obietina, and you have another species on the counterpart on heartwoods. So there's that sort of thing going on too. Brackets in the same genus, but different calicioid lichens on them. This is one of the species that Troy McMullen recently described as a new species. To me, for years and years, it looked like the same thing you'd find on bark. So for years I was calling it Chenotheca ferruginea, but because it had all the features of the ones, its counterparts on wood and bark. But Troy saw something different. So the habitat of Chenotheca ferruginea was bark, wood, and brackets of fungi. But he was noticing something on the brackets of fungi that were a little different than the one on the versions on wood and bark. So they described it, he and the woman from the New York Botanical Garden described it as a new species. Chenotheca balsam conensis. This is a species that you do tend to find in older forests, like a lot of the others that I've shown so far. This one is on very decomposing wood. So it's like wood that you can almost blow on and it would fall apart. That really quite decomposed wood. And this is in a different group than the others have been. And up at the very top is a spore mass. I don't know if you can tell, but it's from this little picture, but it's a kind of a bluish green color. So it has a different kind of a spore that in mass looks blue-green instead of brown or black. This is a type that was on that birch branch that I showed earlier. You can see them kind of sticking up off the top of the branch. So this is this sort of thing, these small ones, about 1/4 millimeter tall, are in the genus Phaeocalicium. So it's a different genus, very usually small. Some of these are laterally compressed, which means that if you were looking at them under a dissecting microscope, it's like they started off kind of roundish, but then they've been flattened this way, laterally compressed, so that in one angle they're kind of broad looking, but in this way they're very narrow. So that's an unusual feature of some of these. This one I named after my son, Matthew. So it's Phaeocalicium matthewsianum. It turns out to be quite common, and people have found it in Europe also, and British Columbia, or at least the West Coast. Another small one, sort of unusual in terms of the habitats of the Calicioid lichens and fungi, is species that grow on other lichens. So the white part of this picture is another lichen, and this Calicioid fungus is growing on that other lichen. So lichen nicholas. This is another short stalk species that grows on another lichen also. And I found this first found it in Maine. I got it to genus. I thought it was a Chenothecopsis, but I couldn't find it in any key. So I sent a specimen to the world's expert who was in Sweden, lived in Sweden. He wrote back and said he was surprised that I had found it because he had just described it as a new species from New Zealand. So here it is in New Zealand and Maine. It's been found in some other places since then. But that's the sort of thing that keeps you excited about this group, little things like this that happen. Different. This is different than the last one. The spore mass on this one tends to rise up in like a cone. So I'm not sure what that's all about, but that's one of the features you can look to identify this one. This is another of the. It seems like the site has to be very old to find this, and it's also non-lichenized. Found this, in terms of moving east to west in the Acadian forest, I found this so far only in Nova Scotia. The taller one with the white pruine around the top, that's one species, and every time, quote unquote, every time, this little one is associated with it, and that's a different species. So there's relationships like that going on too. The smaller one there, also there's another species of it that grows on alders. And in our area, most of the Acadian forest that I've collected these in, one species is growing on downy green alder, and another species is growing on speckled alder. So even when the alders are mixed together along a stream bank or in the same field, they always have had their own little lichen on them. So there's something different.
Do those two use the same algae?
No. The taller one is lichenized, but the little one is not. It's a Calicioid fungus. But there's something going on with
another mutualism of some sort.
Yeah. This was one I was trying to find yesterday in the old growth forest that we went through. This is one where the thallus, the algal, fungal and algal partnership there, the thallus is above the surface, it's on top of the surface, bright yellow, and then the apothecia sticking up. So this is one of the easier ones to recognize in the field. Every once in a while I would find this species, and with this thing kind of mixed in. And I always thought it was like an albino form of the species. But I read some article that actually called this thing a different species. So I went to, it had only been collected once too. So I went to the Harvard herbarium, they have a big lichen herbarium, and found the type specimen, looked at it, and it was also growing with the more typical apothecia. So it turned out that it wasn't a species of its own, it was just a albino form of that species. But here are some of the microhabitats, resin. So this one example of resin of a conifer. So far, at least in North America, it's conifer resin. In the tropics, people are finding these things on hardwood, sap and foliage stuff. So bark of wood, you can find these. Also on the lower surface of bark flakes, like in spruce. Sometimes you flip over the bark, and there's different species underneath the surface. Little hollowed out little nooks that you find under larger trees a lot of times. In there you tend to find Calicioid lichens where you don't find other things, other lichens. There's another one that's kind of a hollowed out little. It's this sort of bracket fungus that you find these Calicioid things on surface of conifers or hardwoods. They're kind of jumbled up, but this is a flipped over tree. So if it's been flipped over, within the last month or so, you're not going to find much on it. But if it's been there for a year or maybe two, you start finding lichens on the roots and over the soil and stuff. So this is good calicioid habitat for some different things. Debark trees, so the wood, so the bark of a living tree, the wood of a dead tree. These are also, you find different things on each. You can even find different species at the bottom versus at the top. Stumps. Okay, this is instead of a ranking system based on 30 indicator species. In 1998, I switched views and I took the subset of all those 30, and that became the index based solely on the Calicioid Lichens and Fungi. So how many of these species would you find in the stand? So this is the ratio. So it's a very young forest. You can find 0 to 2 species. And you go through cereal stage forest, young old growth. Ancient forest is a term that some people use for the oldest of the old growth. So 20 or more species. Okay, these are northern hardwoods forests that I've been to. And over on the right, the number of species that I've collected in each of these stands. So you see Nova Scotia is well represented at the top. So North River, Margery River, Sugarloaf Mountain, these are all, at least from my perspective with using these Calicioid lichens, they're impressive stands. Townsend Woodlot in PEI, that's another good, impressive stand. And then you say New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, New York goes all the way down to zero in southern forest.
Are these all old forests?
Well, they're all forests that I've visited over the years, some of which I didn't know the age, some I knew were like 60 years old. Or, yeah, so they were all different ages. These are spruce fir forests. So Maine takes the top billing here, the spruce fir forest. So Booty Brook and Frost Pond, those are both in Baxter State Park, Mount Katahdin area. But you see the third one down is French River. That was quite an impressive stand of mostly hemlocks. Chinook Lake is another impressive stand. All the way down to 3 at Paul's Cove. Then cedar stands just kind of blew my mind, because especially Berry Brook in New Brunswick and Grand Riviere in that's in Quebec. I couldn't believe how many I found. 38, 37 different species. Most of them are Quebec, New Brunswick, and Maine. I did visit, I think it might be on the next slide, the cedar stand you have here in Hectanuka Swamp. So they had 15, not quite 20, but it was impressive. And that's it.